Hey there, boys and girls. Mr. Macaulay is going to talk to you today about how to choose a scale when you're making a graph. Let's take a look at where do we start and what are our goals. Our goals are to make a graph that will answer some kind of question. And what we really want is we want the bars on the graph to stretch upwards towards the top of the scale. That might look something like this, where the bars are going up high. But what we don't want is the bars down low, something like that, where it's hard to figure out who's the most popular or who's the least popular. And it's really not very informative. It's hard to read that graph. So this is kind of what we're looking for, and this is not what we're looking for. The other thing that you might want, Hey there, boys and girls. Mr. Macaulay here, and I'm going to talk to you about how to choose a scale when you're making a graph. We're talking about the scale on the y-axis. Here we go. So what is our goal? Where do we start? We have to kind of identify what we want. And what we're looking for is we want a good-looking graph where the bars are stretching up towards the top of the scale. We want to use as much of the space as possible. So for example, it might look something like this, where the bars are stretching up nice and high. It's easy in this case to visually figure out who's doing well, who is not popular, or which fruit is this or that. And that's a good-looking graph. This is not a good-looking graph. All the bars are down low, and it's really hard to figure out what's happening, which is the most popular, and we've got a lot of wasted space. So this is what we're looking for. This is not what we are looking for. As well, we are not looking for something like this, where the bars have to stretch above the graph. In this case, we have chosen a scale that's too low, and some of the values even go on top of that. So that's not a good thing either. So normally when we're building a graph, we're often working with a 10 by 10 grid. And so usually 0 is at the bottom of the scale. And we have to kind of figure out what is at that top of that scale. Let's say, for example, on the top of the scale, if we pick 100, what are the units that will step up to 100? Well, if we picked 100, then with a 10 by 10 grid, we'll be counting by tens to get up there. If we pick something like, if we think the top of the scale should be 200, then we'll be counting by 20s. It might look something like that. If we do 500 on top, then we will have to count by 50s. I'm just talking about this just to talk about how to set the graph up, but we'll talk in a second about how to choose that top number. And if we pick 50 as the top, we'll be counting by 5s. So how do you pick that top number? Well, first of all, the number that you're going to use for the top value is going to be a large round number. Here are some examples of some round numbers that you might end up using for the top of your graph. It might be 100. We use that a lot when we're talking about test results. It could be 50 or 500 or 1,000 or 20. There could be some other numbers too. Maybe you want to use 400, but these are a lot of the ones that commonly I would use. Let's give this a try. Now, if the range was from 2 to 18, and the range means the lowest value in the data and the highest value. If the highest value was 18, which one of these round numbers would I use for the top? For me, I would probably use 20 because 18 is near 20, and that means the bars would stretch up near the top. What about if the range was from 5 to 97? Well, I would look at 97, and the number that is bigger than 97, but a round number and close to 97 would be 100. So for me, 100 would be what I would use if I was doing that for the top of my scale. And if the range was from 1 to 8, those numbers are kind of small, I would want to use 10 probably as the top of my scale, because that way the bars would stretch up towards the top. And let's try, what about if it was 350? 350 is my top number. So I'm going to kind of think about a round number that's more than 350. I could use 400, but I'm going to use 500. It's a little easier to work with 500 and count by 50s than count by 40s. And what about 101 to 523? Well, we've gone past 500 this time, so 500 will no longer work. But I certainly can use 1,000, and then I can count by hundreds in my on my scale. So to sum up, to wrap up, these are the steps you would use when you are trying to figure out what is your scale, your y-axis on a graph. First of all, you take a good look at the data and you find the range. Now, really in the range, the most important number really is the highest value. Whatever that highest value is, then you try to find a round number that's greater than your highest value. And we talked about here some examples of some round numbers. Boys and girls, I hope that's helpful. And that is an overview of how you pick the scale and how you pick the top number on your graph when you're using a 10 by 10 grid. Anyways, enjoy. Good luck on the test. Talk to you later.